Now I know you're looking at this and you're just like, wow. Looking at the tools scattered everywhere, the Mini blown apart, looks like the motor is exposed, and thinking, wow, no way I'm going to be able to do something like this. Well, you're wrong. If you follow this video, you are going to be able to do your timing service set, your thermostat, your water pump, your crossover pipe, your motor mounts, your oil cooler or oil housing, and your exhaust gasket. Don't worry, it's not as scary as it looks. Stick around. I'm about to learn you some things. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the garage. We have a project today. Behind me is my brother's 2011 second gen Mini Cooper N16, which is the naturally aspirated twin cam, twin variable timing, all that fun stuff. We got this car very, very cheap because the old owner was like, hey, it doesn't run. It's got electrical problems. I'm tired of putting money into it. It's done. Here's the problem. With these sunroof cars, which this one is, as you can see up here, with these sunroof cars, they are notorious for leaking. The drains, silly design, are located here and on the other side. Underneath these kick panels inside the car are two modules, a footwell module and a junction box, both controlling a lot of aspects of this car. What happens, and this has been recognized by many, is water will pour in and soak both these modules, trash them, making this car not functional. It'll drive, but you're not going to have your headlights, you're not going to have your windows, wipers, horns. I mean, there's all sorts of things that go wrong, basically rendering the car inoperable. We got that taken care of. We replaced both the modules on this, got them coated, and now it runs. So now what we're going to do is what I like to call a mini service. The mini service on these cars scare people away, especially when they go to a dealership or a third party. They do tend to get expensive. They're very compact, the labor is kind of intensive, and it winds up totaling these cars out because it exceeds the value of the cars. Now the problem is, these are notorious for being not reliable, which is actually not the case. We are going to make this car reliable. We're going to do the service. I'm going to teach you how to do the mini service on this car at home with a few tools. You're going to need some specialty stuff. Once you learn it, it is not scary, and you want to be able to do this yourself and saving another second gen Mini Cooper, which are my favorite generation to begin with. So the things that go wrong on these cars that wind up totaling them out because people tend not to just maintain them is the big failure point is the cooling system. The cooling system contains a plastic thermostat located on the driver's side of the block and a crossover pipe that goes behind the block underneath the intake manifold to the water pump, which was also plastic. There's a lot of heat that gets involved in that. They wind up cracking, leaking out. People don't realize it. The car will give you a warning. People ignore it because they see that it's yellow, and then it disappears and they think, oh, it's done, and it's not. And then it winds up giving you a red warning, and by the time you get to that point, the car is toast. These are aluminum blocks, aluminum heads. They overheat, they warp, they wind up getting just blow by, and they completely total the car out, and you wind up having to do a head gasket, or even worst case scenario, a whole block. So this one, when we got it, actually had a very small leak that was perfectly fine. We actually drove it back and forth to the dealership a couple times, and literally while I was sitting in our driveway, the water pump failed and broke and poured all over the ground. And mind you, it had been sitting for like 3 days after we drove it, probably 20 miles. So today's service consists of pulling the front end apart, putting it in service mode, which is not necessarily required, but for the sake of the video, I'm going to teach you how to go to service mode. We're going to do a timing set. We're going to do a water pump, convert it to the metal one. We're going to do a crossover pipe, convert it to a metal one. We're going to reseal the oil pan, and we're also going to do a trans service with this as well. All these services right here are guaranteed to make your car more reliable if the motor is in healthy condition. All right, so I don't know if this camera angle is going to work or how much of the bench you can see because my tripod kind of blocks a lot of my screen. In the box to the left of me here, we got a bunch of parts from ECS Tuning. There are multiple places you can get this, FCP Euro, all this stuff, but my brother saved up quite a bit to get this done. Probably in total about $1,500 or $1,600 to get this entire service done, and the car was practically free. Maybe like $300 or $400. I can't remember what he paid for it. I'm going to show you all the stuff required to do the mini service, including some other things like this Craven Speed phone mount that he wants installed. Start with this phone mount. It is a mag charger, which is pretty neat. Mounts behind the speedometer cluster. It's got a MagSafe charger, something I would like for my car, but do not have. But just makes for keeping the factory speedometer and being able to have navigation. Here is the metal crossover pipe that I was talking about. This goes behind the block. This is one of the things that tend to fail here and here, sometimes even split across here, causing you to lose coolant and then, well, overheating. Valve cover gaskets. Wiper blades, because everybody needs to be able to see. Cabin air filter. This right here is one of the specialty tools that would make your life easier when doing the trans service. Not needed, but it'll make your life a whole lot easier. Oil filters. You actually only need one. One's for me, but he bought a kit that had an oil filter, and then he bought another kit that came with an oil filter, so I get an oil change, and he gets an oil change. Fuel filter. Must need. Change that fuel filter before it fails. The fuel pump will overheat, and it'll pop a relay in the motherboard, and then you get a no start condition. But water pump pulley. See these rubbers around here? These rubbers tend to crack, fail. Once this fails, it loses contact with the tensioner, and then you have no more water pump. Timing chain guides. This is actually a brake sensor. Both of them on his are broken, so he's got a brake light. I'm gonna replace these, so that goes away. Gasket sealer, pans, all that stuff. Pretty straightforward. Another brake sensor for the front. Upper timing chain guide. Lower guide again. These go together. This goes on the top. A lot of times you'll see that these break and then people just replace this. Not the way to do it, because that means that it's already too far gone and it needs to be replaced. More wipers because the rear one's shot on this too. Upgraded timing chain tensioner. Must needed. Once again, if this is bad, replace the timing set. Don't replace this. That's not a solution. These are all the corner markers. They tend to fail on these and break and be brittle, so you might as well just upgrade them. These are LED. Look pretty cool. Not needed, but they look cool. Metal water pump with the metal impeller. They have a couple versions of these. They have a metal one with a plastic impeller, and try to avoid this if you can find the metal one. There it is right there. That's the part number. This makes a world of difference. Kind of prevents that failure that these are known for, and then you don't got to worry about it. Tooth receiver, so you can maintain the factory head unit and Bluetooth to his phone. In this bag here are miscellaneous seals. You got a crank seal, you got the timing chain guide pins. I'm gonna break this open when we actually get to that point and go over everything in this bag. But this is basically miscellaneous seals and gaskets to do the timing service set. Tran service filter. I'm praying this is the right one. They actually make two different kinds, but trans filter, trans gaskets, the thermostat. Now, they do make, for the N16s, a metal version of this. I have not heard a lot of good reviews, so we're going to go back to the plastic one. I know that's counterintuitive, but these are known to maintain temperature a little better than the metal ones, and you kind of, this car is very finicky with temperature, so. Manifold gasket. All right, so this is where your header cat assembly goes. This is the gasket for that. It comes in a whole shield. Little inconvenient, but this is how the headers bolt down. The cat goes here, and there's a cover that goes over that, a heat shield and stuff like that. So you're gonna need one of these. All the fluids. Trans fluid. Water wetter. I like to run this to make it run just a little more efficient. Coolant. I like to use Valvoline. Great stuff. I mean, I use it in everything. They're coated for, BMW, Mercedes, Mini, Tesla, all that stuff. And then my favorite, Molygen. 540. Now, the OE requires 530. We like to put 540 in it, especially for Molygen. Not necessarily needed, but this is my favorite oil I like to use in my car, so we'll be using it in his car as well. And that kind of concludes a brief what you need to do the timing service set, along with other things. So let's start tearing that front end apart. Okay, now to get this front end in service mode. This requires removing the front bumper, pop it out, release bind here. There's a clip between here and here, right here. And right here, there are clips that just pop in. Same thing with under here. There's clips here and here. And if you reach back in there, there's a clip there. that you can either get to from here or the back side underneath here, and you will pull that clip back. This releases the bumper, and in the back corner there, right around here, there is a bolt for this front bumper. Now when you're pulling these off, be careful, they're very fragile. Some of them might break, don't worry, they are cheap. You can get them at any parts store. They are not specific to BMW or Mini. Well, just like this one, see how it broke? Not a big deal. They're not specific. It's bound to happen. But that gives you access to this bolt back here. We will do the same for the other side here. There we go. Someone has definitely been in here before because this wasn't even clipped in. And there is a very shisty wiring repair for the amber markers. But that gives you plenty of clearance to this torque bolt here, which is, I mean, as you can see, that's pretty much all that's holding this part of the bumper on. Now we go across here and we're going to remove all these little push pins here. Very simple. Pull out like this. There's that, and there's that one here. And you can see the grill's loose. Only a few more bolts and this front end is going to come off. Okay, so now I got this from Harbor Freight. It's a little bit set, and you're going to need a T25. You're going to pull this back here, and there's a T25 bolt right here. In this case, this is broken on this side. I don't know if you can see that little piece right here. Now for the fun part, there's a grill that we're going to need to pull forward carefully, like so. To get it off, you can see there's basically literally just clips in here. They're not very hard, but that gives you access to this bolt here and this bolt here. And now I'm seeing a wire that is very concerning. We will take care of that later. But set the grill aside somewhere safe because they're probably discontinued and you can't find them anymore. Then you have two more T25 bolts. And your bumper should be free on this side, free on that side. Reach down in this corner here and disconnect the fog lights, the turn signal, or the marker lights, which this one's broken on this side. But basically, you can either twist and pull them out or disconnect them. I'm just going to twist and pull them out, make life easier. Boom, like so. This one here, honestly, is probably going to break, but this is why we got new ones, because they tend to, oh, this one did not, look at that. Usually they fail right here, they get all swollen and break, and that's why they need to be replaced. Okay, with that said, this should be ready to come off. I don't know what these wires are, not factory, I can tell you that. Let's see if we're caught on anything. Oh, we're still caught on the fender liner. Usually these are broken, so didn't think about it. Whoopsies! Once you get those two pieces off, the bumper should indeed come off. Nothing to see here. Now we have the impact bar. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 13 millimeter bolts. There are 3 front facing, and then right here on these little bull horns, they're coming from the back side this way. There are 2 on each side. We are going to start by taking those off. I kind of recommend putting some WD-40 on here if you have it. If not, no worries. We'll reach back here and we will get these off. And I really need to get a electric ratcheting wrench here because make my life a little easier. But you know what? It's fine. We use what we got. That is what these bolts look like that go towards the back half. All right, once you get all these bolts removed, there are these tiny little T20 that are self-tapped into the plastic radiator support that need to be removed. Hold the impact bar with your foot, or your thigh rather. Take these, and you should be able to freely remove the impact bar. Okay, so now we're going to go on to the headlights here. There is 1, 2, 3, 4 10 millimeter bolts that hold these on. Now, these bolts here on these lower ends, these 1, 2, 3, mostly these 2 at the bottom, might not come out. I have these pre-soaking for a while. If they don't and they start spinning, do not worry, you can still do this by having these two removed and slowly moving the headlight forward so this upper bar can be removed. But we'll start with that and see where it goes. Okay, look at that. Woo! Take the clip back, not very hard. Just push retaining clip, bring it back. Boom, headlight is off. Now repeat the process on this side. So now that we are at this stage, we're going to do a couple different things. Since this upper radiator support is actually held in by this upper tie bar here, we're going to want to drain the coolant, which you're going to have to do anyways if you're doing the thermostat. So we are going to drain the coolant first, and then we will start removing this condenser area and all that. Now, do not panic. You do not, at least on this model, have to take the AC condenser off. You just have to move it to the side, so that way you don't have to evac and recharge that, and you can do this at your house. So the coolant reservoir, and this is already empty because the thermostat popped, and obviously it drained all the coolant out. But we're gonna go ahead and get this out of the way. Pretty simple. It is, depending on your car, could be a bunch of different things, 10mm bowl, Allen head, I don't know, they change them all the time because these technically have to come off for the second gen N18 motors to do the oil change. Sometimes they remove them to get to the oil filter on this too, but in this case mine is a 10. Pop it out. So move this out of the way. So I don't know if you can see this right here, you see that little metal clip, little clip removal tool. Actually it's technically for like radiator hoses, but we're gonna slide it behind here. Careful, these clips will fly out. But once that is free, you could do that, get it out of the way. And all right, so next we are under the car. This cover has to come off and we have to gain access to this radiator hose. So we can unplug the radiator hose, dump it into a container, and proceed with the next step. Man, I cannot wait to get a lift because I am tired of working on the floor. Wow, that's a lot of spider webs. Oh, this radiator support is broken. It's gonna be hard to get to that little bolt. All right, change of plans. So, since we are running into the issue with the radiator support being shoved back, not allowing me to get to the releasing clip, which is basically, it's wedged in between this little plastic piece, so I can't get the radiator hose off. We're gonna take the upper tie bar off. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You're gonna need some T30s, a 10, and go from there. But we're gonna start with the hood release that everybody tends to break. So here's the hood release. Not a hard thing to do, just gotta be careful because it will break, and then you'll wind up zip tying it. So go on this side, pry that, boom, that is out of the way. Now we will lift this up, rotate this out of the way. Let's remove the washer bottle. That out of the way. Kind of slowly start working these up. Try not to break them. It's gonna be clips like this underneath. And then this little frame here, gonna stick your finger in the bottom, pop it up, slide it forward. I like to try to do that. Now the reason why I did that is it kind of allows this to come through here with minimally bending these clips, because no matter what you're gonna have to bend them a little bit, but you gotta try to like boom like that, boom like that. Now we're gonna take our 10mm, we're gonna have a 10 here and a 10 here. Take it off. We're gonna have 2 or 4 T30s. Now these are the hood latches. Wouldn't worry too much about getting them aligned. They are self-centering, so don't freak out. So now you're gonna do your 4 13mm bolts. There's 2 here, 2 here. 1, 2, and it should be, there you go, free. Okay, next, let's free the AC condenser out of the way. All right, so we're gonna take the 2 T25 bolts here. That is free, so we'll take that off, and this should pick up out of the spot. Oh, there's another T25 down here. There we go. And now that we are relatively free it out of the way, it is okay if it sits here like this. It will not break it, so do not worry. All right, so now right here and right here. Okay, let me show you what my issue is here. This is not supposed to be sitting here, it's supposed to be in here. But because of that, the metal clip that releases the coolant line is wedged in between here and here, and I can't get this to shove forward, so we're kind of doing it in a backward step. Either way, it's not necessarily the wrong way. We're just doing it the opposite way. So now the radiator has these little retaining clips here. You kind of got to like squeeze in out of the way and pry gently. Free up like that. There you go. It's got one on that side as well, so you're going to free both sides up here, and really I'm just going to gain access to this and dump it out that way. Alright, so now we're going to free the upper radiator hose that is not on the radiator side, that is on this little T-joint, and pray this T-joint is not broken, because I think you have to replace the entire assembly if you do that, so let's try not to do that. How does that sound? Move that out of the way. Freed up now because I was able to set the radiator support back in place. So now I'm just going to take my pick tool, work around it, try not to make too big of a mess, which means I'm going to make a giant mess. Yep. There's the mess that I knew I was going to make. I'm going to tell you what, if this thing jumps on me, I will scream like a little girl. Anyways, made a mess, per usual, but that's drained. Side note, this was not the right coolant that belonged in there, so I'm glad we're doing this anyways because it is blue coolant. We are most definitely going to clean the front of this out when it's done, but I should have enough to kind of get it out of here. But there's that. Radiator is out. All right, here's the fan. Let us unplug this, and then we will unbolt the radiator support, which is broken anyways. All right, and then we'll take the two 10mm bolts that are located here on this side, and the same thing on the other side. Okay, that's that side. There's this side. So there's clips here in the wheel liner fender flare that need to come off. Two of them. I think there's two on both sides. Alrighty, once you remove the two clips that are here and here, they're just little push pin clips. I'll show you what they look like. They look like these right here. They kind of twist off. They're a little bit of a pain, but once you get these off, you should be ready to pull the radiator support out. This washer bottle is going to come with it, so you got to carefully kind of drain this out because it is a part of it. Unplug this, get the washer out of the way here. There's going to be some ties holding the radiator hoses together. Careful when you're pulling on these things, make sure everything is free. Finagling. There you go. Whoop, as I spill everything, there is the entire radiator support. All right, so you are now in service mode. Now you have access to the whole downpipe assembly, some of the, the oil cooler assembly, which this doesn't have an oil cooler, it just has an oil filter housing, which is leaking, and most of everything else. The timing stuff is on this side. We're not removing the motor, just because a lot of people don't have the ability to remove the motor, but they have the ability, to take a front end off. We're gonna go the least intrusive route possible. This can be done with the front end on, but to save you a heartache while you're doing this, leave or take the front end off. That way you have plenty of access to everything here. All right, so now that I had the front end apart, as you guys see here, this is where it's up to you to figure out what you wanna do next. I have no particular order, but my logic is I like to leave the motor sealed as much as possible. If I'm doing the water pump and stuff, even though I'm doing the timing set, I'm not going to leave it open and exposed to anything that might get in there. So in this case, we still have quite a bit of stuff on the top end that needs to come out. Intake needs to come out. This tube, the echo box or the silencing chamber needs to come out of the way so you can gain access to all the thermostat housing stuff. Along with the wiring and stuff like that needs to be tucked out of the way. So that's what I'm going to do next. And then we'll focus on doing the gasket for the manifold and the oil filter housing. We're going to do that, and you're going to see that it's leaking anyway. So that's what I'm going to do, get this stuff all cleaned up out of the way so then we can start the process of doing that. With that being said, we still got to get the tire off on this side and the wheel liner because we're going to have to gain access to the crank bolt so we can do the timing service and then also remove this motor mount so we can move the motor up and down. Okay, so now we are going to be on to taking the intake assembly off, or at least the filter, the little sound box, and getting this out of the way so we can gain access to the crossover pipe and the thermostat. 10mm bolt here, 10mm bolt here that is captive, so don't try to pull it out. Take your flathead screwdriver, unscrew the rubber intake boot, kind of free it up a little bit. Remove the map sensor plug, and this whole unit should pop off this way. In here, make sure it didn't leave the rubber boots here and here. Okay, now we're on to the thermostat. This is a little complicated, not too bad once you get everything out of the way. There's going to be harnesses that are plugged into the thermostat sensors. This one already has the updated harness installed, so you'll have extra plugs. If you do not have that, do not worry. You'll have one or two, you'll still have the same amount of plugs. So we'll get this plug off here, get it out of the way. Same thing for this plug, get it out of the way. And we will start disconnecting all the hose clamps that go to the thermostat. There should be 4 of them. This one out of the way. Remove the trans cooler line hose, not the actual oil part, but just the coolant part. Moving the back lines now, going to the back of the thermostat. Now comes the removal of the thermostat housing. As you can see there, there's a 10mm bolt there. There is one on the back side, and there is one hiding right there. Take those 3 off, and this should come free. You're going to have a little bit of play on the crossover pipe. However, the crossover pipe is most likely broken and you're replacing it anyway, so if it breaks, don't worry about it. Bolt number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Well, it should come free like that. Alright, there we go. That is the thermostat, which on this one looks relatively new and is not too terrible. Okay, so now we're going to take the tire off so we can gain access to the fender liner and kind of pull it out of the way and get access to all the crank stuff and everything we need for the timing and all that stuff. So now, if you never taken any of these off, they don't have lugs, they have bolts, so don't just let this go or else you're going to have a tire fall off on your face. Now, we're going to take the fender liner out. You don't have to take it out. You could technically just kind of move this out of the way and bungee cord it out of the way, but this is almost out, so we're just going to remove the final clips and one screw and get it out of the way. And that way we have all the room to work on and not have to worry about anything being in the way. And it should be free to come out. Oh god, that's going to be a lot. Oof, gross. That'll give us a chance to clean this rust creator out, but that is what it looks like off, and we need to do this so we can gain access to the crank bolt, the harmonic balancer, the tensioner for the water pump pulley, which is up top there. That is the water pump pulley, which is a little cracked out, and all the serpentine belt, which as you can see here is awful, but gives us access to all that, along with some of the bolts you're going to need up here for the timing service. So now we're going to get the belt tensioner out of the way. This is a little misleading. They do make a tool for this, but the tool requires you to take this off anyways. If not, you can get a buddy to come down here with a pry bar and kind of get the lip of it and pull it up and lock this pin in place, but we're going to use a pair of pliers. We're going to grab this. Hopefully I'm not in your way. Just get you rotated a little bit. Grab a pair of pliers here. And we are going to get really good grip, tilt it down. Uh-oh. Get that pin locked in place like that. Make sure that pin is locked in place, because if it's not, it will get your fingers when you go to take this belt off, and you're going to need help. So now we are at the bottom here where the belt is. There's still one more thing we got to take care of, and that is the water pump pulley tensioner. Right here, this little sucker right here that's covered in oil is a bit of a pain to get to sometimes. However, you're going to wiggle this, use some force because sometimes it's stuck in there. Like this one. Come on. There we go. Alright, so once that is out, you're going to give this a good pull. Like that. See how it's pulling? And you see how it is releasing the tension on the tensioner as I pull this. So you're going to pull it out, and you see that little hole there? Up top above it, there's a little hook that you're going to reach out and hook onto that. Reach out, hook on. You see that little hook right there? Again, right there. That frees up the tension on the water pump pulley, in which you have that wiggle to allow you to get the belt off of the drive system. Let's get the belt off the drive system here. So there's that, and you're gonna have to kind of force it over the lip like so and pull it out of the way. This one needs to be replaced because it is awful. Also, we're gonna go ahead and remove this thing here, which is the little bracket that holds one of the AC lines on. Basically fold this out of the way, pull it out of the way, and there is an 8mm bolt hiding in the muck back there, right there. We're gonna take that off, and that's gonna, when we start moving the motor up and down and freeing it up, it won't break this line here, and this will be perfectly fine sitting where it's at. Now we are going to support the motor. Here's something else. They actually make a tool so I don't have to do this. However, I don't have that tool, so we're just going to use what we got. In this case, it is a piece of wood in which we raise the motor up a little bit so we can take off the motor mount assembly. All right, so now we have 5 13mm bolts. One of those bolts is a ground with a nut that is free spinning, so if you zip this off, it will fall. So I recommend breaking it loose, kind of carefully holding your finger on the back here, loosening this up, let it fall on the ground and lose it forever. Remove the ground strap out of the way. I like to just put the bolt kind of on there like that so you don't lose it. Now we're going to take our 18, remove our main nut here, go back to 13s. It's going to move a little bit, don't freak out. There we go. Upper motor mount bracket is removed. All right, so now we're going to take our 13 here, and we will take our 16. Don't ask me why they do that. There we go. There's that. Now, if this is bad, which this one doesn't necessarily look it, it's not the best, but it'll work. Still got the hydraulic fluid in it. Now would be the time to replace that. Now, we're gonna do the inverted Torx here. We got 2 10s here holding this harness that goes to the alternator and that bolt. Make sure this battery is unplugged, because if that bolt down here decides to touch anything, it's going to spark and you're gonna freak you out. And we don't want to damage any type of ECU or PCM that is out there. All right, so now we are going to start taking the alternator wiring harness, freeing it up and getting it out of the way. There is 2 10mm bolts here. We can jack it up out of the way to kind of gain access here, like so. That is why it's on a jack, because you'll constantly be raising and lowering this motor throughout this process here. Get this back one out of the way. Now we're going to take the alternator signal wire out, and then take our 13, take the main power wire off the alternator. So now that this is free and out of the way, we are going to remove the motor mount bracket, which is an inverted Torx. All right, now we are going to take our E12 E-Torx, looks like that, inverted, and we are going to take all the motor mount brackets bolts off. Once again, this is where I need a little electric ratchet. If anybody wants to like send me one, that would be super cool. All right, bracket is off. Once again, I like to make sure all the bolts are kind of stored in their home. Take these 2 10s because they're very specific. Put them in their homes too as well. That way you don't lose them. All right, so at this point, you can take this bracket off or remove the alternator. It is not needed, but I recommend it for the first time. If you haven't done this before, it'll give you a little more room. There are these 2 E12 Torx that are here and here. Remove those, and you can slide this out of the way. It is on a dowel pin here, as you can see. It might be rusty, it might give you a little hard time. Keep wiggling it, but you can get it out, and that gives you just a little more room to work on this front half here. Okay, so for our next step here, right here is your water pump tensioner. It rides on the serpentine belt and the water pump here, as you can see. This is not going to be fun. However, you're going to need a 10 that has a shallow socket around it, and you're just going to basically have to go in here. They shouldn't be tight because they don't get torqued that much, and loosen every single one of these bolts and take off the water pump tensioner. Like I said, take your time. It's not going to be fast, but it can be done. So a lot of times you're going to be doing this blind because you don't want to stand here and do it all hunched over. So now that is off. Now you got to finagle this thing out through somewhere. There's really no good way to do it. Might have to drop the motor a little bit. That should clear up. Boom, right there, enough room. There's a little more flex in that motor mount than you guys think, but free up enough room to, boom, get this out. Now this is your tensioner. That is the system here that I was telling you to pull back and lock. So once you pull it back, there's that little hole right there, and there's a little tab to keep this locked and unloaded and not tensioned. If it is damaged, replace it now or forever hold your peace. Now we're gonna get the water pump pulley. This is gonna be a bit of a pain. These should not be on there tight, but we're gonna break those loose and we're gonna get the water pump pulley off so we can gain access to the water pump. So these do not require a lot of torque, so they should not be on there very tight. That's 2 and 3. Kit will come with new bolts. Sometimes it won't. It won't hurt to reuse them. I've reused them on mine and never had an issue. Probably have to go through the bottom. There we go. This is your water pump pulley. This is another failure point on these cars. As you can see how they are starting to crack. What winds up happening is these crack and the rubber that is coated with will chunk off and it will make a god-awful noise, sometimes mistaken as rod knock. And it's not, it's usually this. So there is that. Now we are on to the Harmonic Balancer. Okay, pretty easy. Hopefully you guys have an impact because it'll make your life a lot easier. It is yet again an E12 Torx, inverted Torx. And all you gotta do is zip them off like so. Boom. Not that hard. These do not get torqued down very hard. It is going into a very soft metal and you just gotta wiggle it free, maybe. Oh, there you go. That is off. And as you can see, this front main seal is actively leaking, along with some of the timing cover bolts and stuff like that. Now is the time to inspect this when you have it out. Check to see if the rubber along this side and this side are failing. If it is failing, I recommend replacing this because these will walk, destroy your belt, all sorts of messed up things, and it is crucial. So now we are on to the intake assembly. For an N16, I recommend taking this loose. If you don't, it's going to be a pain to get that crossover pipe in, and you're just going to start fighting it. But there are a few cautions you need to take. So right now we're going to get this rubber boot off. All right, so we'll get this 7mm bolt off the intake. Get this out of the way, like so. So the part that I'm telling you to be very careful about is this little vacuum line here. This vacuum line is very fragile. You can break it if you're not paying attention, but you're gonna pry up on both sides of the tab while pulling out carefully, like that, and leave this out of the way. And now we're gonna take the throttle body off. So now we're gonna take a T30. This one's a little extra, but we're gonna get the bolts off for the throttle body. You have to get the throttle body off to gain access to the timing chain tensioner. All right, third bolt. Now the throttle body should come off. Get that unplugged, pull it up and out. You can reuse the gasket, do not recommend it, but there is your throttle body. It will be sitting on the car something like so, at an angle. And you're gonna have your bolt here, you're gonna have your bolt here, and then there's this little hidden bolt that I was talking about that goes through the assembly. There you go. All right, so this one's a little difficult to see, and I have my camera propped up in a very curious way, but we're gonna take and start removing the intake manifold. Careful with this vacuum hose. One of the bolts is being covered by it. Oh. You will have 5 total. bolts holding the intake manifold off, plus the bracket that's at the bottom. Okay, so now I'm under the vehicle. This is the front half of the vehicle. This is the back half of the vehicle. And if you look up here, where is it? If you look up here, you will see the starter as coolant drops in my face. And right there is the bracket that is holding this entire intake assembly on, and it needs to be taken off. Alright, so we got that bracket off, and if you look closely, it's going to be kind of hard to see. Right there, there's another 10mm bracket that needs to be loosened up. Okay, so now that we got those two brackets done, we should be able to carefully remove the intake. We're gonna have a couple things that need to come undone, little clips and stuff. Rotate it aside. What else? Look at that, all these clips, man. Uh-oh, I dropped you guys. What are we stuck to here? Oh, wiring harness. Make sure that gets plugged back in. And there we go. That is the intake manifold. You got a bunch of random just clips here, here, here. You're just gonna have a bunch of random harness clips that you gotta undo, but that is out of the way now. Alrighty, so now we're looking top down, and we will see right there what one of the main failure points for this car was. A thermostat crossover system right here was broken and caused this to fail and slowly start leaking. However, we will take this off, get this all undone, get this out of here. That is garbage. Looks like a lot, but it's really not. Okay, now we are still on the passenger side of the block, and we will be getting the water pump housing off, which is 3 10mm bolts. This is what I say: when you remove all this stuff, you'll have easier access to these. Alright, now once you get the 5 10mm bolts holding the water pump housing on, you should be able to pull it free like this. Get it out of the way. It's either going to come out through the bottom or the side. Really depends on however you have this disassembled at this point. But here is the water pump with the plastic impeller. These are known to fail and crack, and that is why we're upgrading it with the metal one with the metal impeller. Alright, before we go any further, please help me out. Feel free to subscribe to this channel. There is plenty more of this going on. You see my race car in the background, you see the MB Miata, my Mini, and other stuff that are coming in to do really fun modifications to. So hit that subscribe button, really helps me out, really helps get the channel out there. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, and hit that bell notification so you get notified when I post more content. At this point, the vehicle is in service mode. We got all the stuff we needed out of the way. We got the old water pump, the old crossover, and the old thermostat out of the way, so pretty much all the cooling components. And I'm going to reinstall the new metal water pump, metal crossover pipe, and the new thermostat housing. Get that all buttoned up before we move on to the timing chain service and, you know, open up the motor and get all that stuff exposed. I like to do it this way. That way that's all done. I don't got to worry about, you know, especially if you're new to this, all the parts that you have taken apart so you don't feel overwhelmed. So we'll get that all buttoned up, put on there, and move on to the next step. So before we go any further, I like to take these soft metal wire brushes. You can get them at Harbor Freight or any of that stuff. And we're going to clean the mating surface here. Get it all free of any type of leftover rubber from the old thermostat gasket and any type of contaminants that might be in the way. Just make sure it is a soft metal brush because this is a aluminum block. You do not want to destroy it by accident and mess up the surface. Now that that surface is clean and free of any debris, we're going to install the water pump first, simply because you want something for that coolant crossover pipe to stop. If you accidentally pull it in too far, this kind of blocks it and allows it to not go all the way through and outside of this hole. If you do it in reverse order, you risk the chance of that coolant crossover pipe coming all the way through, and they are kind of a pain in the butt to get out once that happens. So carefully pull this down here. You don't want to get the gasket all messed up. All right, and there is a guide pin to line this up, so you really can't put it on wrong. And go ahead and start adding your 5 10mm screws. Lightly snug these down. All right, now that we got it all snug, we are going to take our inch-pound wrench, if you can get it in there, and we will tighten it to about 9 foot-pounds or 108 inch-pounds. Okay, now that all the bolts are tightened to 9 foot-pounds or 108 inch-pounds, we'll move on to the thermostat crossover assembly. All right, guys, so this next step is a little tricky. Here is your coolant crossover pipe that goes behind the block. So if you're looking at the block this way, this is the back half of the block, this is the front half, this is where this piece goes and connects to the water pump. You're going to be installing these kind of both at the same time. You're going to kind of get this set in place while working this into here and getting the thermostat attached. Once that is attached, you'll be taking your little retainer clip here, and as you can see here, it slides in like so and locks the thermostat and the crossover together. If you cannot get this in, this is just me, you don't necessarily have to run these. I have not had an issue with them leaking. This is just a peace of mind. I like to try to get this in at all times, especially if I have room like we do now. But if you can't, don't panic. Not necessarily needed. This will be sandwiched between against the block, and this is not going to move. All right, so the camera angle on this is going to be a bit weird. We're going to try to make this work the best we can. Okay, so before I decide to install this, I'm going to try to lube the O-rings up with some sort of like a grease, chapstick, something that doesn't contaminate the cooling system, just lightly. You're not going to be doing anything crazy, just enough to kind of help you that assembly. Put it together. I am going to finagle this through the back side like so. Kind of get it lined up. That is kind of where it needs to be. We're going to slide the thermostat in here carefully. Make sure all your wires are clear out of the way. And we are going to mate it with the thermostat, or the crossover. Get that in there like so. They can only go on one way. There we go. All right, like I said, it's a bit of finagling. That little O-ring did not want to go in there at first, but it is now seated. Now we can get the thermostat in. It can be a pain in the butt to get this in here, and you will get mad, but just take your time. Alrighty, so now that is where it needs to be, we will start to bolt up the thermostat. There should be no force, do not force this on there. Alright, now that we got those snug, we're going to go ahead and torque them down. We're going to torque these to 8 Newton meters or 70 inch-pounds. Alright, that is it. Now to button everything up as it came off. So as you can see, the new thermostat is on. There's that bolt there, and there's one hidden over here. If you see if I can get to show you right there. The crossover pipe is here, goes across. That little clip is in there, and everything is secured. And as you can see, once this is bolted down and in here, this pipe is not going to go anywhere. Had a little bit of a hard time getting this gasket in here, but everything made clear. So now what I will do is go ahead and clip up any little loose ends you might have, any little retaining clips that might go on there, which I think for the most part all these are good to go, and these clip to the intake manifold. So that is all done and torqued down, and we will go ahead and plug everything in to where it needs to be. Now that we got that all installed, next we will be installing the intake manifold and replacing the gaskets with new OEM gaskets. Now we're going to be putting the intake on the same way it came off. Be sure to plug in everything that you unplugged. And in this case, there's a vacuum port here, there's a sensor here, and then there is your manifold pressure sensor, and then a little bunch of clips kind of just clip into, you know, here, here, and here. You'll kind of see little alligator teeth as they go. But kind of shimmy your way into here, moving the motor forward if needed. Alrighty, once you get that installed, it is kind of a pain. Be sure to plug in your vacuum port here. On the back side of that, there is a plug that looks exactly like the Vanos plug, so be careful. You'll be able to tell usually because it's dirtier. But these plugs are interchangeable. Do not plug the Vanos plug into there. You will have a hell of a time trying to start your car. But there's a plug near this underneath here. It looks exactly like that Vanos plug. Plug that in. Get your allocator clips installed and verify that everything is connected. Your MAF sensor, and then all of your intake bolts. One here, one there, one there, one there, and one there. Once you got the bolts snug, go ahead and tighten your intake manifolds. I like to go from the center out, kind of working back and forth, to 20 Newton meters or 188 inch-pounds. Okay, once that's done, do not forget about your two 10mm bolts that were at the bottom of the intake that go from the bottom up. Now that we got the cooling system done, thermostat, crossover, and water pump installed, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next piece. We're going to move on to the oil filter housing gasket. As you can see here, we got a little bit of leak going on. Pretty common on these, especially the turbo models. And since we have access to it, we're going to replace it. While we're in here, we're also going to replace the exhaust manifold gasket. Not needed, but if you're in here and you have it, might as well replace it for peace of mind. First, we're going to start with the manifold to exhaust clamp. It is a 16mm bolt. I prefer using an impact. Now we're going to carefully undo the O2 sensor wiring. Careful with these brackets, they're very fragile. If they break, you can always zip tie them out of the way. This red clip here pulls out, slides out of the way. This bracket here slides forward. You got to get it kind of a tool behind it to release it like that. That way this is out of the way. And that gives us free range to take the upstream and downstream O2 sensors out. Oh boy. All right, let's take this upper shield off. Now we can get these two lower 13mm bolts out. Hopefully they come out smoothly. Now we have 10 12mm bolts. Now this should be free to kind of finagle out of the way. There we go. Now we got the exhaust manifold out of the way with the O2 sensors in place. We now have access to remove the heat shield / exhaust manifold gasket to give us access to the oil filter housing. Now what we're going to do, we're going to remove this bracket right here that is holding the O2 wiring sensor and the temperature sensor out of the way. Unplug that. We're going to leave that clipped in there so we don't destroy any unnecessary clips. We're going to take the 10mm here, loosen this up, swing this out of the way. Ideally, you're going to want to remove all the oil out of the motor. To do this, I did not, so we're going to get a little bit of a mess. However, I got to clean this up anyways, so we will remove the 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts holding the oil filter housing down and wiggle free. You are going to get a little bit of coolant and stuff pouring out of here. That is perfectly fine. You're going to have to do the oil change with this as well. That's why I waited, and I'm going to drain the oil afterwards. And as you can see right around this area here, we already had a leak developing slowly. One of those gaskets was failing at the bottom here. It was leaking down outside of the block. Now we're over here in the bench. I'm going to do the oil filter housing gaskets. This is the kit right here. It comes with a new O-ring for the oil filter, which your oil filter comes with one anyways. I'm assuming this is if you just changed your oil filter and you don't want to replace it, but at this point, like, oil filters are cheap enough, might as well use that. But here's the two kits. I'm going to try to get this cleaned up as best as I can without a parts cleaner. I'm actually going to use carpet cleaner because I've noticed that kind of works really well. Don't know why. A carpet cleaner and a brush. Alright, now that I got it mostly cleaned up, time to get this filter, which you can see is brittle, out of the way. We're going to take a clean wire brush and clean that surface. These are super soft bristles. Just keep that in mind when you're doing this. Do not get anything rough. You don't want to ruin the surface or gasket area by accident. Cause all sorts of other problems. Alright, now that I got the surface all cleaned up, we are going to install the new gaskets onto the oil filter housing. Got this surface all cleaned up, a lot of elbow grease, kind of the same concept. I used my carpet cleaner and scrub brush and all that stuff because that's all I had. We are going to get the bolts ready. We are going to set the oil filter housing up here, start the threads. Hopefully we can get this kind of tight enough before it starts potentially leaking any residue in here. We're going to lightly snug these down. Do not over tighten them. They do not take that much torque to get these on there. All right. Okay, now that we got these started, we're going to go ahead and torque these 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts up to 88 inch-pounds. Now that we got this installed, we're going to go ahead and replace our filter with a pure flux filter. Please, please, please highly recommend using these filters. These are the OEM style filters that came with from Mini. They're the updated ones. It avoids any of the oil pressure sensor switches from failing, and I highly recommend these. Plus, filter housing is made by Pure Flux anyways. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace that. Replace your O-ring. Move this out of the way. Go ahead and tighten this down. These do not need to be very tight. I mean, not at all. Right there. That's it. Okay, now that we got the oil filter housing buttoned up, we're going to go ahead and get the new exhaust manifold on. There's that. Let's get the bottom bolt started. Now I'm going to start all the upper exhaust manifold bolts like that. Alrighty, now that we got those started up, we're going to carefully snug them down to at least so they can sit flush. Let's get these snugged up. I am not tightening these all the way down. Alrighty, now that we got the exhaust manifold on there, we're going to go tighten all the bolts to 25 Newton meters. I like to start in the center and kind of work my way out in a cross pattern like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now that we got the exhaust manifold torqued down, the bottom bolts torqued down, time to do the heat shield. Alrighty, so we get that done. Now we're going to put our bracket back on for the temperature sensor. That. Put the first O2 sensor in there, the upstream one, the downstream one in there, then the upstream. Connect that, slide that in there. There, and there is that. Alrighty, so that includes how to do the oil filter housing gasket. So behind the scenes, I actually wound up doing the transmission service. I didn't film it. There's actually a really good video out there that has a step-by-step process. I'll probably just link it in the description below. Now that that's done, the transmission service is all sealed up. We're actually going to go on to the big one, and we're going to do the timing service, which involves tearing apart half the motor and pulling the valve cover out and oil and all that stuff. So we're going to get to doing that step, and we're going to first start by draining the oil, and we're going to go from there. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to drain the oil so we can get the oil pan off and go from there. Wow, that's some dirty oil. While that oil is draining, I also have to reiterate, to do the timing service, you do not have to be in service mode. This car is already in service mode, so we're just going to do it this way. But while this oil is draining, we're going to go ahead and remove the valve cover assembly. We're going to start with the coil packs. I like to take a screwdriver here, kind of lightly pop up on them. Nothing too crazy. Doesn't take a lot of work if they're not stuck, which thankfully these are not. If you haven't replaced these in a long time, don't know the age of them, now's a good time to do that. These do look like the older style, but they are working right now, so we will leave them be. So next we're going to take a 10. Normally at this point you'll remove all the wiring harness, but we've already done so, which entails of removing the ignition coil wiring harness, the little 8mm bolt that you got to be careful with, the grounding cable, setting that aside, taking off both the cam positioning sensors, set that aside, unplugging the little miscellaneous clips here and there, like so, the fuel injectors. That'll give you access to the valve cover, and now we have several 10mm bolts we got to take out. So if this has not been removed, most of these are going to have Loctite on them, so I like to use a impact to get them off. The timing. Alrighty. Now those valve covers are glued down. Valve cover seals are glued down, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Like I said, this one's been off before, so it is not going to be 100% sealed. We will set this aside. So now comes the part that everybody freaks out about, is putting the motor in TDC. Since we already have the front end torn down with all the motor mounts and stuff like this, when you get to this point, basically you're going to have no accessory drives. All you're going to have is access to the crank bolt, and all your pins and stuff will be exposed. We are going to put the motor in top dead center. As you can see here, this motor is actually in fairly good condition for what how it was treated. It's not the best. It's got some grime buildup and whatnot, but it is still better than what I've seen before, but still needing a little more TLC. As you can see down here, that timing chain tensioner right there is actually well past what Mini recommends. So this is why we're actually doing the timing chain service. Plus, this is a new car for my brother, and we want to make sure everything is top notch before he picks it back up. So back to the TDC. As you can see here on these cam lobes, there's actually writing somewhat there. It's very hard to see right there. So this is a good indication of your TDC. What we're going to do is we're going to go down here and we're going to rotate our 18mm bolt until those two visual indications of the basically VIN stamping or part number stamping are face up. And down here, you're going to see a little hole right there. And in there, you should see a pin, which I will put a light in and see if we can get this. You should see a pin. And if that is showing the hole where the pin is, I'll show you here in a minute, and those two cams are lined up, faced up like that, you are at TDC and you lock it up. But before we do this, before we go any further, you're going to need a special tool to lock these cams in place. Alright, so you're going to need a special tool like this. This is what, you can get something like this on Amazon. This is to lock an N16 and 18 motor down, along with the locking pin that goes into the flywheel and the cam locking tools, and then your timing chain tensioner tool preset. So let's get this motor in time, and then I'll show you how to set this up. I went ahead and marked the cams for a better visual representation of what the TDC would look like. This is where the engraving for the part number would be, and then as you can see here, these two flat tappet parts would be top dead center. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your 18mm wrench and you're going to attach it to the crank bolt. You're going to rotate the motor clockwise until these two cams are positioning face up and these two are flat, and then you're going to go down to the crank and verify if your crank locking pinhole is visible through the port. So let's go ahead and rotate. I know this shows that it's top dead center. It's actually 180 out, so we will rotate another 180 and get that taken care of. Once you get to this point where your cams are face up, you should see some small markings and writings. These should be relatively flat. And we're going to go under here, and inside that top hole up there, you should be able to, I'm going to try to do this with one hand. All right, this is hard to do, but inside that top hole, you should be able to see right there, that hole. That is where you need to put the lockdown tool into to lock the flywheel. Okay, once the motor is in TDC and you see that little guide pin hole that is basically the locking pin that's in the flywheel that allows the locking tool to lock through the transmission and into the flywheel to keep the motor from turning. It should look something like this. Most of them sit flush like that. Some of the manual transmissions stick out partially, but if it looks like this, it means that it is locked in place, and I would go ahead and give it a test turn to see if the motor turns over and make sure that it doesn't spin. Now that you are at TDC, you're going to go ahead and apply your cam locking tools to here. And here. Make sure everything lines up. Realistically, the N16 one will come out here and bolt down, but do not worry about that for this point. Just make sure that if you have the correct one, this bolt hole will line up here. Mine doesn't, but I've done this enough to know that as long as this stays where it is, the timing is going to be fine. We are going to use the supplied bolts to lock down the timing set here. Once we get those started. All right, so we're going to go ahead and tighten the timing tool down to the block. There's 3 points usually. This one has 2, but as long as these are tight, they don't got to be like super crazy. They just have to be snug to prevent this whole assembly from moving. You are good to go. Now, once you get to this point where the cams are locked in place, both of these are facing up, your pin to the crank is locked in, you are TDC and you're good to start the rest of the timing chain procedure. So now, I'm laying underneath the car, facing the front. The next step we're gonna do here, which by the way, this is not needed if you are doing just the timing set service, but since we are resealing the oil pan, we're gonna be doing this next step. We are gonna be taking off the oil pan, which as you can see here are quite a few 8mm bolts. So we're gonna take all these 8mm bolts off. We go all the way around here and we're gonna drop this pan. That's gonna give us access to not only cleaning the surface to reseal it, it's also gonna give us access to the oil pump, in which we're gonna put a new chain and gear on. Once again, not a necessary step because they hardly go bad, but since we're gonna be while you're in there, we're gonna go ahead and do that. Oh boy, Exhibit A is kind of way I wish I had a lift, but I'm here to show you that you can do it without a lift. So let's get by starting, so let's start taking all these bazillion and one oil pan bolts out. I'm gonna leave one of these kind of loose but in there, so when we break the oil pan down, it doesn't fall all the way off. We're just gonna do this one tiny turn at a time. There is an oil pan bolt here that apparently the freaking exhaust is in the way. I wasn't aware of. I don't remember this being a problem, but this shows you the last time I did an automatic one. Maybe the last time I did an automatic one, I'm pretty sure I had the exhaust off already. So, okay, so as you can see right here, this bolt right there, that one right there, is blocked by the exhaust. It is a pain. If you have a special short, shallow swivel, you can get to it, or you're gonna have to slowly break it loose with this and work your way loose. But now that we got this loose, we will take a rubber mallet and we will bust this pan loose. All right, so I like to take a rubber mallet, get that pan freed up, and then, you know, take this bolt off and that bolt off and take the pan out. And after a little persuasion, here is your oil pan. Okay, now that we got the oil pan off, you can see we have access to the oil pump and the oil pump gear. We're gonna slowly, carefully remove this cover off, and that's gonna give us access to the chain that goes from the crank to the oil pump drive. This step, if you want to change the oil pump chain and gear, you have to loosen this first before doing any of the timing service, because this is a pressed in style timing set. So basically you have a bolt with a chamfered shaft that bolts between a gear set and the crank, and it is pressed in place. If you free this up first, you will never have enough torque to break this loose. So we will take this cover off and break this bolt loose first. So we're gonna take my pry tool here and we're gonna pry carefully behind this piece here, break free both sides, and we're gonna kind of do this side here. See if I can wiggle this loose without it popping off here. There we go. Now you have access to your oil pump chain gear assembly. And this one, holy crap, this one actually has quite a bit of play. Yeah, this is too much play. Normally they don't have that much. They have a little bit, but this is, yeah, that's quite a bit. So let's go ahead and break this bolt loose. Okay, now we're gonna take our T45 on an impact, and we are going to break this loose. Oh, there we go. I'll let that sit kind of in place like so. Doesn't have to be tight. That way that is loose, because you will never be able to get this bolt off if this upper crank bolt stuff is still sandwiched. So now we will go ahead and loosen our crank bolt and our upper cam bolt, along with timing guide pin, the uppers, and the 2 lowers here. Okay, so now I got my impact, and I'm gonna break loose my 18mm crank bolt. Highly recommend a impact. That is loose. And kind of snug it back up a little bit. And then we're gonna go to the top and break loose our Vanos kind of cam gears here and here, and then our chain guide pins, which are here and down here. Take an E14 reverse Torx and break these loose here and here. Okay, now that we got the crank bolt loose and the 2 cam gears loose, we'll go ahead and take the upper timing chain guide loose or off, which are 2 8mm bolts. They are not torqued in that hard, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Now that you have the crank bolt loose, these 2 upper cam gears loose, and your upper guide loose, we're going to take a 27mm socket, and we are going to put it on the timing chain tensioner that is located below the Vanos solenoid right here. It is a 27mm socket right there. And we will take this out. Be careful with the vacuum line that is here and the tip of the Vanos plug-in. They can easily be broken. Wow, that was scarily loose. Okay. Well, that was not torqued down to spec. No way. Because I sure did not loosen that up. As you pull this out, I would be very careful. One of 2 things are going to happen. It's going to come out with no problem, or it's going to come out in 3 pieces. Spring's going to fall, and if you have the oil pan on, you're going to cry, because then you're going to have to drop the oil pan to get all the pieces off. But this one just looks like it's super extended. Right here, it is at its failure point, but not taken apart. A lot of times there is basically this inner cylinder and a spring, and when they are beyond stretched, you go to pull this out, it'll explode, and then you have pieces everywhere. So just keep that in mind when pulling this out. Carefully pull this out and make sure that this is not about to explode, and if it does, slowly pull it out, and you'll be able to get it out in one piece without the spring assembly and stuff falling into the oil pan. Now we're going to remove this timing pin guide and the 2 below. All right, so this upper bolt here is going to be a T50. Break that loose here. Don't worry about getting confused, because they are different. Now, as you take this out, you will have to either get a new bolt or find the washer and replace the washer. I recommend just getting the new bolt. It's cheap enough, and you might as well just do it right. So that is your upper guide pin. That's what it's going to look like. It is a T50. Now time to do the 2 lowers, which is a T45. Okay, now we're moving on to the bottom, where we're going to loosen up these 2 T45s. I kind of broke this one loose already here, and then here. I broke this one loose already too. Since you have the motor on a jack stand, you might have to just raise and lower the motor to gain access to this to make your life a little easier. Now that we get these out, there's going to be 2 of these. They're identical. Unscrew these. They look like this. They have a rubber seal. Once again, highly recommend replacing this or replacing the rubber seal. Either one needs to be done. You cannot reuse these. You cannot reuse the crank bolt. You cannot reuse the oil pump bolt. These 2 seals for the timing, the upper one and the cam bolts, none of those are reusable. All those have to be replaced, and your kit should provide them. Now that we have the upper timing chain guides out, the cam bolts loose, crank bolt loose, the 3 timing chain guide pins, we can go ahead and remove the timing set. These are not replaceable. You're going to have to go ahead and replace both the upper cam bolts along with the crank bolts. Now I go to the bottom, and I will take the 18mm bolt loose. This is what it looks like. That is not reusable, so throw it away. So now we will remove the washer or the cam bolt spacer. I can't remember what it's called right now, but the gear goes here and then it goes up to the upper timing chain. So this sandwiches between the crank and this also has the gear set for the oil pump gear. This removes this. You're going to keep this. Do not drop it. Do not damage it. If not, you're going to have to get a new one. So that is free. We'll take these here, free this up here. I like to leave them on the side. Make sure that they are in the correct position. They are labeled. As you can see here, this says EX for exhaust. This side here says IN for intake. I like to set it to the side here. Now, if all set is done, everything is free, including the oil dipstick, which I should have had out a while ago. The timing chain guide set should come up like this. Now, your kit will come with a new oil dipstick side, this side, along with the gear set. So you can go ahead and throw this away. Now that we got the upper part of the timing guide assembly, which is the main one, here is the oil pump that I was telling you about right here, that you have to have this loose because you will not be able to break this bolt loose when this is free like this. But since we got a new one and this is actually really loose, we will take this bolt out. All right, go ahead and replace this bolt as well. And then we will slowly take this oil pump gear set out off the crank. Okay, this was a little hard to do with one hand, but this is your oil pump gear set. As you can see here, this one was a little worse for wear. The gear set looks pretty good, but this chain was a little loose. They all have some sort of play in it, but I think this one was a little looser than I'd like. So I'm just go ahead and replace it. And like I said, if you have the pan off, why not go ahead and replace this? Once we're at this step, we're basically gonna go and reassemble everything the same way we took it off. So let's put the new timing set and oil pump gear chain in. Okay, now that we have access to this, we're gonna go ahead and take the front main seal off. Careful not to mar up the engine block. Ow, I just punched. Don't do that. Let's see if we can do this without destroying anything. Try not to. There we go. And it is out. So this is the new chain and lower gear with the old gear up top. We will go ahead and get this in the motor. It's gonna be hard to do with one hand. Okay, so we got the new oil pump chain and sprocket on there. And as you can see, if you have it on there right, it should be able to freely spin here. These are sectioned. As you can see, there's a flat piece right here. So these can only go on one way. But that will be on here and it needs to be free floating. And go ahead and put your new bolt in here and just snug it down. Don't have to worry about tightening it. Just make sure it's snugged all the way down. All right, so a little hard to see, but I got the new timing chain guides, timing chain, and timing chain gear assembled. We are going to go ahead and slide it into the block like so, going down to the point where, if I can get this right, it's going to be kind of hard to see. Oh, where are you? There you go. This will line up like so. Once that is lined up, you're going to go ahead and carefully insert the spacer here between the gear set and the lower gear set. Sometimes it goes in smoothly, sometimes it doesn't, but you're going to get that in here. And then I like to set the chain on a screwdriver like so we can get the cam gears installed. Using the new bolts provided in the kit, we're going to go ahead and put the exhaust cam Now, it doesn't matter which way these are facing, as long as they're on there on the right orientation, i.e. exhaust on the exhaust side and intake on the intake side. We're going to go ahead and snug this down by hand, like so. And then we're going to go ahead and add the intake cam, like so, using the new bolt provided. Go ahead and put this on there, like so. So these should be somewhat free spinning, nothing too crazy, like that. And then same thing with the crank bolt, and install it in the crank bolt opening along with the spacer. And all you have to do is hand tighten it down. We are not fully tightening it yet. Now we will take our upper timing chain guide, the new one that comes with a new bolt and a new washer, and we will go ahead and make sure it's inserted between the timing chain guide and the block. You can see where that little pin will go. Hand tighten this down. Does not have to be torqued yet. And then take the two remainder lower timing pin guides and go ahead and do the same thing at the bottom. Put these in there and hand tighten them until they are snug. Do not worry about torque spec yet. They look like this. Now comes one of the most important parts. This is your timing chain pre-tensioner tool. This goes in the same spot in the back of the block that the timing chain tensioner goes into. We will screw this in here, and then I will show you how to use it. It takes a very particular torque spec. It's like 0.6 Newton meters, but I will put this in here and show you what needs to be done. Okay, so in the back of the block right here, that hole, we will stick this timing chain tensioner tool into the back. You can see the bolt starting to, there we go, come in contact. And we'll make sure that this is flush. It only has to be hand tight. Then, once the main part right here is hand tight, right here, we will start to spin this into the block. And what this is going to do, it's going to start applying pre-tension to the chain assembly. And it's going to be really hard. I'm going to try to do this without moving. But once you do this, as you can see, how the timing chain is starting to tighten up here, like so. We will torque this down to a very specific torque, and then once that is torqued to where it needs to be, we will go ahead and do the torquing procedures for the cam bolt, the crank bolt, the oil pump bolt, and then all the timing chain guides before we put the actual tensioner in there and torque it down. Next, you're going to see that timing chain tensioner tool here, right here. You're going to take a very, very specific tool, basically a 1/4 inch electric torque wrench, and you're going to need to read 0.6 Newton meters. And you need to pre-tension this timing chain assembly to 0.6 Newton meters. So we're going to go ahead and start doing that like so. That is it. That is all it needs. As you can see, right about there, it kind of gives you the exact depth that the OEM tensioner needs to sit at, and it pre-tensions everything, including this upper timing chain and all that. So now we can proceed with torquing everything down. So I like to work my way from the bottom up, from the crank bolt, torquing that down, then the two cam bolts, then the timing pin guide bolts, and then the oil pump bolt as well. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to torque here is this 18 millimeter crank bolt that goes to the crank hub. The first torque spec we're going to do is 50 Newton meters, followed by 180 degrees. So let's get this down to the 50 Newton meters first, and then do our 180 degrees. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is tighten this down to 50 Newton meters. Then what I like to do is I like to mark the bolt here. In this case, this bolt is perfectly laid out to where this is the up mark, and we're going to want to spin this bolt into this mark is pointing downward. That would be 180 degrees. I do not like to use the torque wrench for this because I don't want to damage the torque wrench. Instead, I'm going to use a very long breaker bar. It has a very similar throw, and we will rotate this until it reaches 180 degrees. Just be happy that this is not an N55, or this is like 3 million degrees. Alrighty, as you can see, that bolt is now facing downward, and it is torqued to spec, which is 50 Newton meters and 180 degrees. Now we're going to move up to the two cam bolts. Now, for the crank bolts, we're going to do something very similar, except we're going to do 20 Newton meters and 20 Newton meters, and then 180 degrees and 180 degrees. I don't really have a particular order. I always just start with the exhaust side. We're going to do 20 Newton meters. All right, normally I use a silver Sharpie to get this marked. Since I don't have a silver Sharpie, I'm going to use just a little bit of Torque Viz so I can get a mark on the upper mark there, or 180, and then we will twist those to 180 degrees. And then we will reset again. Now the torque sequence for the cam bolts are done. Now we will do the upper timing chain pin guide to 30 Newton meters. I'm gonna go just a little bit over, just because I feel like that's more comfortable, and that's what my gut is telling me. And then we will do the 2 lowers to 25 Newton meters. Okay, now we're gonna do the lower oil pump sprocket bolt to 5 Newton meters and then 90 degrees. Okay, 5 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. I'm gonna do the same trick here. I know this wrench has a degree, but if you don't have that option, I'm gonna mark here, make sure that it gets to about that side there. 90 degrees, there we go. Before you forget, like I did on one of my cars, make sure you put your oil pump chain cover on, because if not, it will be super loud and you will be able to hear this from outside of the car. Now that that's installed, we can go ahead and install the upper tensioner into the block. Now we're gonna go ahead and install our upper timing chain guide. I have reused these upper timing chain guide bolts a lot, never had a problem. If you can replace them, go ahead. If you can't, no worries. Okay, now we will go ahead and tighten these to 8 Newton meters. Now that we are done with all that, we're going to go ahead and release the timing chain tensor tool, which is the little 8mm bolt in the back here. Once that is released, we will take the entire tensioner tool out of the engine block, like so. Then we will take the new tensioner here, which is the upgraded one, and we will go ahead and install it into the back of the block. Once again, be careful with your vacuum line and your Vanos plug. You do not want to break those. Once that is snug, you'll go ahead and proceed to torque it down. Once you have that installed, you will proceed to torque it down to 80 Newton meters. Okay, so we got to this point now. We have there are some serious bugs on this roof, and it is terrifying. We have the timing set done. We have that all torqued down, and we have everything where it needs to be. Now, the fun part. We pretty much do everything that we did in reverse order. So, that being said, we're going to start with the oil pan and work our way from the bottom all the way to the top. I'm a little scared. From the bottom all the way to the top, and put this thing back together and get it back on the road. Okay, once you got the pan relatively clean, at least the surface clean, I kind of went ahead and cleaned up the outside of the pan and stuff, and torqued the drain plug down with the new crush washer, which you can kind of see there. You also want to make sure that the underside of the motor, as you can see here, all this sealing surface around, all the way around there, needs to be clean and free of any of the old gasket maker. I simply just used a wire wheel and a wire brush and scrubbed it and then cleaned it and then used a little bit of brake cleaner. But you want to make sure all that is clean. Front end I kind of cleaned up a little bit, way better than it was before. As you can see, it's actually not covered in grease. That way, if something does start leaking, we can see where it comes from. But after all that's done, we're going to go ahead and lay our bead here of RTV. And then we're going to kind of do this whole put it up there and then slowly start threading bolts in until it's level, and then we'll torque them down. Alright, so this is probably a pretty crappy angle, but we're going to try to get this done without spreading and smearing this everywhere. Get these started here. Alright. They are not tight, they're just snug. We're going to continue doing the same thing for the rest of the oil pan. Once you have every bolt kind of hand started and that's snug down, go ahead and torque down all your bolts with the provided torque specs that I'm going to leave in the picture here somewhere. You'll see it, but yeah, go ahead and torque it. It is a sequence style torque spec, but not that difficult. Just this bolt here, which I recommend once you get it down, just hand snugging it tight, pretty close to what you think would be the torque spec. There is gasket maker on there, it will not leak. Now that I got the oil pan on, we're gonna go do the front main seal. Now, they do sell a kit for this. I've only used it a couple times. The other times I have not. I haven't had one fail except, can't remember what brand it was. It was not a mini brand. But doing it this way, I had not had one fail that wasn't related to the seal itself or some type of vacuum, over vacuum failure. The trick to this is you need some type of soft tool like this. It's got a really soft edge and hammer to tap it in. All right, so make sure you lube the inside lip with some oil very lightly, and make sure the lip ring or the inner ring goes around the crank and doesn't fold over. Because if it folds over, then you'll have a problem. I'm just gonna do this without knocking this camera down. It's gonna be kind of hard. Now I'm gonna slowly work. Yeah, that looks good. I like that. Okay, now that the front main seal is on, oil pan is on, we can go ahead and remove the timing set locking tools from the crank at the bottom and the two cams on top. Now normally it says to rotate 180 degrees, or basically one full rotation until you can get back to top dead center and verify timing. If you followed every single one of these steps in order and to the T, you do not have to worry about that. It would always reset back to the proper timing unless something catastrophic happens, so don't worry about rotating the motor over and then relocking and rechecking your timing. Now we're going to go ahead and clean the head. We're going to get the factory gasket maker that's in the corners here and clean it off and prep the surface for the new valve cover gasket that you're going to install on the valve cover. Careful not to gouge or mess up the head with anything abrasive. I like to use a wire brush to clean the head, free of any debris. Careful not to throw anything into the head, obviously, because that would be counterproductive. Alrighty, once that is cleaned up, I'm gonna go ahead and wipe down this surface with brake cleaner and a clean towel. Now that that surface is nice and clean, we're gonna go over to the valve cover and prep that to install. Okay, prepping the valve cover is pretty straightforward. Make sure you do not drop any of these bolts out when you flip it over. They are loose, they are not captive like the N18s. We go ahead and remove the old valve cover, which is relatively okay. Valve cover gasket rather. Valve covers from here, the little gaskets here, and then there's 4 individual gaskets that sit on the spark plug tubes, in which I'm going to flip over, get the spark plug tubes out to give me more access to those gaskets. Pretty simple, just kind of squeeze them together, pull them out, pull that out, flip it back over. That gives you a little easier access to all these seals, like so. Now I'm just going to go ahead and clean the inside of the channel where the valve cover gasket sits, like so, and make sure that no contaminants are in there to cause the gasket not to sit flush. Once that is done, we will grab the new valve cover gasket. Alright, so we got the new valve cover gasket. We're going to put these rings in. They do not go in any particular side. Now that it is all snug, we will transfer this over to the motor. Okay, before you install the valve cover with the new gaskets, you're going to go ahead and apply the same gasket maker that you use for the oil pan and the factory spots, which is just a dab right here in this corner, like so. And then same goes for the other side, a dab right here in this corner. Okay, now you're going to take the valve cover with the new gasket on it, slowly flip it around, make sure none of the gaskets fall out, because sometimes they like to, and it's really annoying. But flip it around slowly. And then go ahead and install your bolts. Now when installing your bolts in an N16, there is really no particular order but one. That is the ground strap bolt. It goes right here, dead center, and it needs to go back in that same location every single time you do one of these. After that, go ahead and start your bolts into your head and valve cover. Once you get that done, go ahead and start slowly snugging this down, getting them set. That way you can torque the bolts down in the proper torque sequence and torque specs. I'm going to use an impact, but I'm not going to be slamming these down home. I'm just going to lightly get them seated. Do not tighten this down. Snugly do this, because if you tighten this down in the wrong sequence, you can crack the valve cover. Now we can go ahead and torque the valve cover to the proper sequence. I will leave that on the screen. Okay, once you torque the valve cover down to 12 Newton meters in the order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We can go ahead and start reassembling the motor and getting ready to put on the accessories, and one step closer to firing this thing up. So now that I got the valve cover all buttoned up, I'm gonna go ahead and start plugging certain things back in here just to kind of get it out of the way and closer to finishing. So we'll just start kind of putting everything back together the same way it came off. Do not forget this ground is extremely important. You do not want to fry your injector module, so make sure you get that tightened up. Only it's got to be snug. Don't go ahead and like cramp that thing down, because a lot of people make that mistake. And they go tighten to 1,000,000 foot-pounds and then they can't get it back off later. Most of the harness stuff is kind of buttoned up. Now let's move on to putting some of the accessory stuff on, like the water pump pulley and tensioner and stuff like that. Okay, this is going to be kind of hard to see up here in this corner, but we're going to take the brand new water pump pulley. See if I can slide it around here. All right, you know, get these snug down by hand, kind of as tight as you can go. Doesn't have to be too crazy because they are not on there that tight to begin with. These got little spring washers on them too, so they should be tensioned down with that. Alrighty, and there's that. Okay, so now we're going to put the crank pulley on. Make sure your crank pulley, it is not falling apart. This one is not. Okay, now that those bolts are tight, we'll go ahead and torque it down. Okay, so next, right here, we're going to go ahead and put the belt tensioner on. If I can get it in here. Sometimes these are a pain to get into where you need it to go. So just make sure you kind of get it in from the right way. So you can kind of see that's where it sits right here. The neck sits down right here, and then the pulley sits down in between the crank and the water pump pulley. Alrighty, let's jack this thing up a little bit. See if we can get a little better access to this. Sometimes it's like a catch-22. Sometimes you really don't get any more access doing it this way. Now we play the game of forever slowly turning these bolts one by one. All right, I know I skipped this part, but it literally takes like 9 or 10 minutes of you just doing these little half turns on every single one of these 10mm bolts, the 3 of them. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our grenade here, the belt tensioner, and we are going to go ahead and put that on by taking these 2 super long bolts out. So these do not need to be that tight, so there's that. They are aluminum, so they just need to be snug. There we go. All right, now I'm gonna put the belt on. I'm gonna go ahead and release the tensioner, and then I'm gonna start doing the motor mount hardware stuff. Okay, so all the accessory drive stuff is installed. Now I'm gonna start working on the motor mount wiring harness area. We're gonna start by putting the motor mount bracket on. This is what the motor mount bracket looks like. I'm gonna take the 2 10mm bolts off, or here and here. That is where the wiring harness bracket goes to. And go ahead and get this started. I kind of like to start with the opposite corners here to get the bracket kind of in its spot. All right, now I'm gonna take the E12. All right, now that we got these on, go ahead and tighten them down. You can torque these down if you want. I just make sure they are snug. I will leave the torque spec there. Now remember, if you are hand tightening these without a torque wrench, these are aluminum going into aluminum, so do not strip it out. It takes a good snug, but nothing too crazy. They're not gonna come flying out. All right, okay, so before you put the rest of the motor mount assembly on, make sure you take your wiring harness for your alternator. run it through to where it needs to be, which is the alternator itself and the signal connector, and go ahead and tighten that down. Do not over tighten these at all. You will break your bracket, and if you break the bracket, they tend to rub on the water pump pulley, and then if they rub on the water pump pulley, next thing you know, you're going to be destroying your pulley and causing a bunch of other unnecessary problems. Okay, there. Now we'll go ahead and plug in the alternator cable power and the alternator cable signal, the 14mm bolt. Don't forget to tighten that down, or else you're going to have all sorts of charging problems and you're going to be really confused with what's going on. Also, I probably already said this, make sure the battery's unconnected because you will shock yourself. This just has to be snug, not on there tight, because you will break the stud off of the alternator. Once that is on there, we can go on to putting the motor mount itself and the upper bracket. Okay, now we're going to do the upper support bracket. I'm going to jack this up even more here. So you can see the motor's kind of shoved back a little bit, but I'll make that work. All right, now we will tighten this down. Alrighty, so now the fun part, moving the motor forward and bringing it down at the same time. So let's see if I can do this without pinching my fingers and crying. All right, kind of there. Gotta beat this forward. I don't want to get my finger crushed. There we go. Nice. Go ahead and tighten that upper bolt. There's that. Now we will install the ground strap. Here we don't forget the ground strap because you have all sorts of problems if you don't. Get that a little snug. Now we have the motor free floating on its own again, supported by the motor mounts. Still have the throttle body to put on, so that's what we're going to do next. Once the throttle body's on, we're going to start putting the front end together and hooking up the radiator and all that stuff. Alrighty, we got the throttle body bolted on with the 3 T30s. Don't forget to plug in the throttle body. It's going to be kind of hard to see right there. Don't forget to plug that in like so. It's going to be a little bit blurry. You get it, point. There it is. Don't forget to plug in your cam vano sensor. Alrighty, that is bolted up. That is bolted up. That is bolted up. All these are bolted up. Now I will start assembling the front end. All right, so honestly, I'm probably gonna put you guys on a time lapse for this, just to get everything kind of buttoned up and put back together. But we got all the main stuff done. We got the exhaust done, the oil filter housing, all the accessory drives, the valve cover, the timing set, the water pump, all that stuff associated with that is done. So now we're getting on the home stretch of this button up the front end and getting everything back together so we could prime the motor and get it running. At this point, the entire front end of the car is put together. Everything is hooked up like it needs to be, and we are ready for the priming and the topping off of fluids. So we're going to put some coolant in it, we're going to put some oil in it, we're going to prime the motor, and yeah, see if this thing fires up. For oil, I am using Liquid Moly's 540 Moly Gen. I'm going to put the entire thing in, or pretty much close to the entire thing, only because we dropped the pan and we pretty much drained all the oil out of the oil pump and the motor. It was sitting open for a while, and usually when I do this, it takes almost the entire bottle, but we'll leave about half a liter behind and prime the motor, run it for a little bit, and then verify the level from there. Okay, now we're going to go on to the coolant. I'm going to open up the reservoir here. If you look down here, this is going to be really hard. Do you see that little Phillips screw? I'm going to stick my screwdriver in there. At least try to do this while recording. Right down there. We're going to crack that open, and we're going to leave it half open, just enough for the air to start breathing out of the coolant system. This is one of the only ways you can do it if you don't have a vacuum system. We're going to go ahead, and I'm going to start with water wetter, because water needs to be wetter, and why not? And we're going to pour it in here. Now's the time you find out you forgot to tighten X amount of hose clamps. As you can see, it's not filling up because it is draining to the highest point over there. Alrighty, now we are going to take Xerox or BMW G48, pre-mixed or diluted, depending on how you want to do it, and start topping it off. Pretty much all I'm doing is have a flashlight right here, and I'm watching it until the coolant starts basically pouring out of there. All right, there we go. We have coolant coming out of there. Tighten that up a little bit. Do not over tighten this. It does not take much. It just needs to be barely snug. You will break them and then you're gonna cry because you won't be able to bleed them again. And it's just gonna be a nightmare. Go ahead and top this off some more because once that thermostat opens, it will take the rest of it and we can always suck a little out if it's too much. So there is that. Now that we have the coolant mostly topped off here, I'm gonna go into the priming stage. Now for me, priming stage consists of taking the starter signal here, opening it up, getting it off like so, and you're gonna take the white wire and you're gonna make a custom thick wire here to plug in. All right, onto the white side like so. All right, once you do that, you're gonna touch the starter like that, and that's basically going to signal your starter to engage, and we will rotate the motor until oil starts coming off the cam gears. Which, as you can see, kind of already looks like it has. So we're gonna keep doing that until we feel comfortable with it being pre-oiled, and then we'll fire it up. All right, now we're gonna try to start it. Pretty sure the battery's dead, so we'll give it a try anyways. Oh, look at that. Nice. All right, now that we got that turned on, I'm gonna let it warm up a little bit. I'm gonna burp the coolant. I'm gonna verify the transmission level, and then we're gonna kind of just tighten things up. Hey guys, the video is kind of weird, I know, and I really, really hope that this helped anyone who has a second gen Mini, whether it be the N18 or N14 block. You know, do a full service, because I'm trying to help anyone not go to the dealership if they do not have to. And if you're competent with tools and you can follow directions, you should be able to service your Mini Cooper. Now here's the thing. This video took a very, very long time to make, and definitely would appreciate it if you subscribe, you know, give it a thumbs up, comment it below, get the algorithm pushing to everybody who likes mechanical stuff or, you know, minis or any of that stuff. But as you can see, the Mini's still sitting back here. The reason why it's sitting the way it is and it's dusty and all that has a lot to do with the dealership. Let's just say it was never like this when I got it. The sunroof was never open. As you can see, all the stuff is kind of broken apart up there. We took this in for the JBE warranty, okay, the footwell and all that. When we got it back, after weeks of arguing with the dealership, this is how we got it back. JBE failed again for water intrusion. And I'm gonna go over more of that in the next video, and I'm gonna show you what happened, what was wrong, what they did, how they treated us, and I'm not gonna mention any names. I hope you guys can figure it out. Do know that this does run, and I have a more in-depth video now on how to repair a JBE, why they fail, and how they fail in the next upcoming video. Maybe not the next one, but in next couple videos I put out, you'll start seeing it. But anyways, I really hope you enjoyed this video. I know this wasn't like a crazy content video. This is more of an informative how-to type of video, DIY, all that type of stuff. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope that it helped someone out there. All I ask of you guys, something really easy, just go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and use this video over and over again. If you need help, show friends or anything, if they have this issue, go ahead and send them this video. That would be greatly appreciated. And as always, I will see you guys when I see you later.
Tell me who gon' rise and fall. I've been running from my flaws, still I'm standing 10 feet tall. Mirror, mirror, don't you lie. I can see it in my eyes. Truth gon' surface every time, even when no dancing with my shadow in a room full of gold. Trying to count on my regrets like the stories I told. Mama said, boy, don't sell your soul for a plot.